In this tutorial, you're going to learn about the response codes that you can get using the HTTP module in make.com. All right, so in the last few videos, we used this HTTP module in multiple different ways. So this is the last part of this little HTTP module tutorial series, and we're going to look at what the response codes mean and which ones there are. So we used this HTTP module, and the response code that we've gotten was 200 the last time that we ran it. But the time that we ran it before that, we got a 403. So what does this mean? What do these status codes mean? In order to understand that, let's look at a quick presentation here. So status codes are indications of the result of an API request. So they matter because they help you in debugging and understanding API interactions. So there are different categories of response codes, and the response codes are this status code that you get as output when you are making an HTTP request. Okay, and they can have, well, certain numbers, right? So they start either with a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So if they start with a 1, then they are just informational status codes. If they start with a 2, then they are success status codes. For example, the status code 200 means okay. The status code 201 means created. All right. So then there are 300 status codes. So these are redirection status codes. So they redirect you from the URL that you thought you wanted to access to another URL where the thing now resides, whatever it is. Maybe a certain file or a certain website or whatever. Then you have the error codes, which are client error codes and server error codes. So client error codes start with a 4 and server error codes start with a 5. The most common client error codes are 400, which is a bad request. So you're trying to access something that doesn't exist. 401 is you're trying to access you're not authorized for. 404 means this item that you're trying to access just isn't there. So it just doesn't exist. So what's the difference between a bad request and not found? The bad request response code just means that there is something wrong in your request. For example, the wrong parameter, or the parameter doesn't exist or something like that. And the 404 not found plainly means that the endpoint that you try to access doesn't exist. So the URL that you're trying to access doesn't exist. But then there are the server errors. So for example, the 500, which is an internal server error, or 503, the service is unavailable. So this just means that maybe the server is down and you're trying to access a server that doesn't exist, or something is wrong with the server. Okay, so these are the different response codes, and the most common ones that you will come across is going to be 200, which is okay, which means it was a successful request. So you tried to access an API and it worked. You got the data back. Perfect. That's what we had here, right? We got the status code 200, which is the response code 200, which means perfect or okay. Then 400, which is a bad request. So something is wrong with your request. Then we have 401, which is unauthorized. So that happens when the authentication was required, but you didn't enter it accordingly, or it was just invalid. So the token that you tried to access the API with didn't work, or the API key didn't work, or you're just not signed in, so to speak. And then the 501, which is the internal server error. So there's something wrong with the server and it just doesn't respond accordingly. So these are possible response codes, or some examples of possible response codes. There is a full list of a bunch of them. If you want to learn more about the response codes in depth, you can check out the Wikipedia article here. You see there are a bunch of different response code options here. 300, use proxy, unauthorized, payment required, forbidden, not found, and so forth. So you see there are a lot more than the ones that I just showed you, but many of them you will never come across unless you are a developer that works for many, many years. Most of them will not be something you come across. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this series, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and comment, as well as subscribe. I would really love to hear your opinion, and please let me know what you want to learn next. So with that, thank you very much and have a nice day.